post whatever we talk about, and that way y'all could go back to it, or if reference it later. So I thought this would be a good thing to try. We could answer questions, and also people that take the class virtually can also have a chance to ask some questions. Just as a reminder, anytime we do kind of a review, it's meant to fine tune. It's not meant to reteach anything. You guys have all the videos, you have all the lectures. You can go back and rewatch and get a more detailed explanation of different topics and content. Okay, so this is just kind of are these kind of questions allowed, or can you please remind me? I know this, but what about that? And just any kind of those kind of fine tuning type of questions, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay. So would anybody like to break the ice and get started with this review? Chance, how's your shoulder? I hope I didn't hurt you too bad the other day in class. Would you help me with that manual muscle test?
Yeah, I'm fine.
I know, I'm just messing with you. Thanks for helping me with that.
Bro.
Awesome. Anybody have any? Remember, everything, not only is everything on Moodle for Unit 3, I include old lectures. So if you go to Moodle, you'll see a list of all the old lectures. But this semester's lectures are all in my live, and they're dated. So if you go to all of my live streams, you'll see Unit 3, and then the order is literally based off of date. And they alternate because I have 310 and I have 415. So, the 310s will say KNES 310, Unit 3, and then they're in order of date. So Moodle, I added more resources for you guys to try to help, but Moodle has old lectures, and then my YouTube has all of our updated lectures from this semester. So you have a wealth of of uh, of resources out there. If there is a concept like the radio ulna joint that you're still not, comfortable with, just go rewatch the lectures, and maybe kind of taking it from the beginning might click, sometimes. So that's just want to make sure that that's available to you guys.
I don't have a particular question this morning, but I was curious to know, will we be provided with the knowledge check for this test?
Yeah, that's not me. So all of the knowledge checks and all the reviews, those are students. That's student driven. I don't make them do it. I don't ask them to do it. They were just kind of doing it on their own. So what I would do is check with Miriam or Sydney or Sarah and see if they are doing it. But they were just doing that on their own, to try to help. So I really don't have any part of that. So check with them and see if they're going to be doing something like that.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
So I was looking through the Unit 3 material, and um the trunk and pelvis motion.
Mm-hmm.
So you give two examples. One is posterior pelvic girdle rotation with associated trunk flexion.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of confuses me a little bit. Like I kind of get it, but I can't really see what's going on. So can you kind of explain it?
Absolutely. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up an example on my phone so that I can show you in real time. Um, so let's visualize while I pull it up a reverse crunch, right? So what we know about like a regular crunch exercise, your pelvis is supposed to stay fixed, your legs are supposed to stay fixed, and you're just flexing and extending the trunk like on a regular crunch, correct?
Yeah.
So what a reverse crunch is what if we keep the upper part of the spine fixed and we bend the lower part about the upper part. So it would look something like this. Are you guys able to see that in the camera?
Yeah.
So notice how the pelvis is wanting to do a back roll, like it's spinning posteriorly on the way up and it's spinning anteriorly on the way down. So watch posterior, anterior,
Okay.
posterior, anterior, posterior, anterior. Now, remember the pelvis is like a basketball. Something has to spin the basketball. So from when your feet are off the ground and your upper extremity, you see how her hands are kind of pushing on the ground? That's kind of playing the role of her feet in this example. So her trunk is going to have flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. And what's cool is that a crunch and the reverse crunch works the same muscles. It's just kind of like one of those this is moving, this is fixed, this is fixed, this is moving. So in the regular crunch, I'm flexing my trunk from distal to proximal. And in a reverse crunch, I'm still flexing my trunk, but proximal to distal. You know, it's crunch, reverse crunch, flexion, extension, flexion, extension.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Great question. Was this a good source of explaining it? Like being able to, I'm looking for feedback for this type of review. Was that
Yeah,
did
that's
that kind of work? Awesome. Outstanding.
I was looking through my notes last night,
Uh-huh.
and for the right-handed hitting for like batting, I
Hmm.
didn't have written down what the radial ulna joint was doing. I would assume that it stays semi-prone the whole time, starting and finishing. But I just
Hmm.
want to clarify if that was right.
Yeah, your radial ulna joint is going to have to rotate together. Once you make contact, you're going to have this type of they actually have
Okay.
a catch-all name for it, rolling over. But it's very similar to turning the wheel of a car. It really
Okay.
is. It's just that we are here on the bat. So what's going to happen is that when I'm a right-handed batter, um, when I come and I make contact, my left hand is going to become supine and my right hand is going to go prone as I roll over. So, in other words, where I end isn't where I started. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay.
Start, finish. So I
Okay.
did it
Thank
that
you.
way. You're welcome. I hope that helped. And I could grab my remote control here, but when I make contact, I'm going to roll over to reposition so that because what's really happening, and this isn't going to be on the test, but just maybe for your curiosity, if I don't roll over, then my elbow can't. So I'm extending to make contact, but I can't hyperextend. That would damage my arms, right? So when I roll over, I reposition my elbows as well so that flexion can help me slow down the bat swing. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good question. Let's keep it rolling. We're on a roll here. How many of you guys utilize the thumb rule? That's a good, I think
I'm
that's a
sorry, I
really
didn't hear what you said.
Oh, that's okay. I was wondering how, because the thumb rule that I taught you is something that I came up with. So I was
Mm.
wondering if that was working for some of you to see radial on a joint position. So, and also I haven't zoomed in a while, so I'm forgetting, but I'm typing. If somebody doesn't want to talk or you feel uncomfortable talking, feel free to type a question in the chat. Awesome.
Can you go over the the example where you had your hand over your head and we were talking about I guess we were talking about the rule of thumb, but you had your hand over your head
Hmm.
and your hand was you had your palm facing up,
Uh-huh.
like you flipped your
Oh,
palm.
like this?
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. So one of the reasons I give you that example is to show you that the radial ulna joint position and motion doesn't always line up with the soup bowl example that a lot of you guys have been introduced to.
Hmm.
So maybe freshman year or maybe a high school anatomy class, they'll say supination is when you make a soup bowl. And I'm not saying you are not supinated here. The act of supination would be creating the soup bowl. But what it does is it makes your brain associate when my palm is facing the ceiling, I must be supinated. And that doesn't happen when we're over our head because we established that if I have a spoon and you see the front of it and I don't spin it, I just flex it, well, now you're going to see the back of it. It's just kind of common sense. So when I'm over my head, when my palm is down, I'm actually still supinated because all I did was take the spoon. Here's my soup bowl, and I dumped the soup over my head. Right, like I'm still in the same position for
Correct.
my radial joint. The thumb rule shows us that my thumb is still lateral. This is the lateral part of my right arm. Okay.
Okay.
So what I'm showing you with the thumb rule is that this is the medial part of my arm. You don't see my thumb, correct? So I can't be prone. When I do this, now you see my thumb. Now it's on the medial part of my arm. I must be prone. Prone. Supine.
Okay.
Thumb rule lateral. Thumb rule medial. I'm wiggling my thumb for you. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yeah.
So it's an example to show you not to use, and it's something we've said several times, Chance, and I know you remember that, but why we don't use global references. We can use local references, nose, sternum, pubis, thumb, right? We can use local references when they work, but what we don't want to use is something goes to the ceiling, something goes to the floor, right? We don't want to use global references because that's what's going to get us into trouble. Javion, how would the radial ulna joint work with a basketball shot? Okay, so for us, so if I'm, let me see if I can put it down a little bit. So when I'm here, so I'm a left-hander. So when I'm shooting, I start off being prone, and when I release, I actually stay prone. So you would stay prone. Biggest reason is because you want your palm to stay facing the rim, right? You never want the back of your hand. So it makes sense why you would want to stay in a prone position while you're shooting. Good question. Really good question. So far, y'all have great questions. Keep it up. And again, I'm recording this Zoom and I'm going to upload it to my YouTube channel and I'm going to post it on Moodle. Okay. Okay, let's see, Ashlyn. I understand the scapular movements when they are by themselves, but when I add in shoulder movements, it confuses me. And it confuses a lot of people. You're not alone, Ashlyn. It confuses me sometimes too. only because when I'm making the movements myself, sometimes my scapula does not move. Okay. So one of the things I try to do so of course we analyze motion joint by joint, but the scapula and the shoulder can complement each other for certain functional tasks, reaching forward, reaching up, reaching down, right? So most of the questions that kind of have scapula and shoulder together are when they're working together to do certain things like horizontal adduction for the shoulder. The scapula can help me reach across my body by protracting. That makes sense. Or if I'm trying to reach back, the horizontal abduction, the scapula can help me reach a little further back by retracting. We talked about when the arms go up, whether that's abduction or flexion, the scapula is going to help reposition that socket by upwardly rotating. And then when arms come down, they would downwardly rotate. So sometimes when it's hard to see, it's good to just remember kind of, this goes with this when I'm doing that as kind of a rule of thumb or reference. Um, and as always, the questions I'll make sure to clarify exactly, like how would the scapula move? Um, so let's say if we were doing shrugs, I think one of the biggest things we did in class, right, when we're doing shrugs, that's not shoulder, that's just scapula, right? Because a shrug is nothing the shoulder can do, right? The shoulder doesn't elevate. The shoulder flexes, extends, abducts, adducts, internally and externally rotates. The scapula elevates and depresses. The scapula shrugs. Elevation, depression of the scapula. So I hope that helps. That the scapula is just we have independent moving shoulder girdles to help our reach and to help our grip and to help our movements in our functional circle. Awesome. You're very welcome. Great question. I think so far
Can
I'm
you
getting
I'm sorry.
no, please. I was breaking the silence. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Can you further explain the example with like a upright row and what happens with the radial ulnar joint?
Sure. Let me pull up a picture of it. Um, so so I'll first say this. Remember when we were talking about the shoulder, how your shoulder can't just straight up abduct without having a little bit of external rotation. Do you remember that part?
Yeah.
So what's going to happen is as we're upright rowing, our shoulders are mostly in our frontal plane, right? And so to get those elbows up high, my shoulder is going to have an element of external rotation to it to help me get high. Because if I don't, there's no way I'm going to get those elbows as high as I need them if I'm going to bring the bar up to my chin. The radial ulnar joint motion is to cancel out the shoulder rotation to keep your fingers under the bar. So in essence, if I start off at the bottom and I'm in a prone position, right? And my fingers are under the bar, holding the bar. If my radial ulnar joint doesn't move with my shoulder, then as I bring it up, I'm actually going to see my palm because look, I'm still prone. If I stay prone, the bar is now going to be supported by my thumb. And I want my four fingers to support the bar underneath, right? So as I bring my shoulder up, I need to supinate at the same time so that I can keep my grip under the bar. I am now in a supinated position up here. My thumb is lateral. So the supination happens because the shoulders are trying to bring the palms here, and I'm going to supinate to keep my fingers under the bar. And we could use the thumb rule to see it. So like if, let me show you a good picture. Try to find a good picture. Here's a good picture. Perfect. So her thumb, so her thumb would be at the top, which is great because we want the fingers to be at the bottom when we're up, right? And so if you follow her thumb at the top and you follow it down her arm, you're going to notice that it leads you to the lateral part, the outside of her elbow. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yep. So she's here. If all she did was move her shoulders and not her radial ulnar joints, you'll notice that she's supine. And that's to keep the fingers under the bar. And as she goes down, she's going to pronate to keep the fingers under the bar. So that's kind of cool how that's how our bodies use these individual pieces collectively to help our grip, help our work, help put our fingers in different positions. That's kind of the magic of part of the magic of how we move.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. The reason it gets tricky is because it's not traditional. You guys have only been introduced to this. And what I'm trying to show you is that, well, no, we've had precedent where you can have motion where it looks like it's moving, but then you could also have motion where, one end could move about the other end. We've done that a ton. This is an example of that, where we have the traditional way to move it, but we also have a non-traditional way of moving it where the distal part stays fixed and the proximal end is pronating and supinating around it. And so it just looks different. But if we use our laws and rules that I teach you, we don't assume. We analyze the position of the joint before we move. We analyze the position of the joint after we move. And even though we may not see it yet, that could prove to us the motion. Because if I started prone, but I ended supine, I had to have supination to get there. Okay, I just saw another question. Would you say it also has shoulder flexion with extra? Oh, okay, Ashton, great question. When you flex, you don't need rotation. I advise you to go back to my previous lecture where I had the Kindle to demonstrate this concept, but I can use the remote. That's why I have this remote control here. So let's say this is the face of the remote. This would where Ken's face would be, okay? When I'm in anatomical position, let's say the head, this would be the head of the humerus. And here's my socket. So this would be like my left. When I flex, the head stays on the socket, the articulating surface, the hyaline cartilage. When I flex, I don't need to rotate. However, if I do abduction, I can't make the head face away from the socket. I have to keep the head on the socket, right? So that's why when you flex, you don't need rotation. But when you abduct, you have to externally rotate so that the face stays on the socket. Let me know if that makes sense. So flexion, no need. Abduction, you got to rotate it so that you end in the same position, that you end in the same place. Ashton, let me know if that makes sense. You're welcome again. And again, I advise you guys, if that answered that question, like, chef's kiss, perfect. If not, just go back and rewatch because I think I took the Kindle and I did that again. So just if you need a refresher, feel free to go back on that lecture to hear it again with my patented Kindle technology to describe the glenohumeral joint. So on the test, a type of question I could ask is like if she starts here and lowers the dumbbells down. And the illusion is that a student who hasn't learned this stuff and practiced this stuff might say, well, I didn't see this happening, so therefore there must not be any radial ulnar joint motion. But hopefully my students will say, well, I'm not going to assume, even though I may not see anything, let me check the position. It's lateral. The thumb is lateral. She starts in a supine position. Now let me check the position. She's medial. She had to have pronation as she lowered the dumbbells down. If that makes sense. If she stayed supinated, she'd have to break the bar, and she would have to break the bar, and she would come down like she'd have to come down like this to stay supinated, because all of that would have been shoulder. So one of the things you guys know about us humans, grip is very important to things we do. So we have very cool ways to make sure we can keep our fingers holding on to things, gripping things while we're moving them and going up and coming down. And that radial ulnar joint is one of those ways. Let me see if think of another question, guys. I'm going to go grab a bottle of water. I'll be right back. All right. We have any other questions? Okay, wait. I think I got a new one right here. How is she supinated? Because her thumb is lateral. And so think of it like this. If this would be pronation, this would be supination. If I only moved my shoulder and I didn't move my radial ulnar joint, I'm not moving my radial ulnar joint at all. I feel like John Cena. Notice how I am supine. I'm supine here. This would be prone. Prone. Supine. Does that make sense? I had to really concentrate while I was doing that because I'm seeing a mirror image of me. It's kind of freaky. But that's why. Because if you're supine here and you do this, you're going to see the back of your hand. What I mean by that is your fingers are going to go from being down to being up. So if I want to keep my fingers down while my elbow and shoulder are trying to bring my fingers up, I have to pronate or supinate to maintain my fingers at the bottom. And that's what's happening here. At the bottom, I'm prone, but when I bring it up, I need to supinate so that my fingers stay on the bottom. Because if I stay prone, my fingers are going to be at the top and my thumb's going to be at the bottom. This is a prone position right here. My thumbs are medial. This would be like flying like Superman. Superman flies prone. What if Superman moved his shoulders and his elbows only? This is prone. It's a prone position. This is a supine position. And that's why you're supine at the top of the upright row, so that you can keep your fingers on the bottom of the bar. Let me know if that answered that really good question. So Remember some of the old advice I keep giving for tests that, there's going to be some questions that are hard. Radio on the joint stuff can be confusing, but there's going to be a lot of questions that are going to be easy. And I always say you got to make your 2-foot putts. Like it's okay or it's less of an issue if you only miss the hardest ones, but you get all the easy ones right. It's more of an issue if you miss the hard ones and you miss the easy ones, right? So, when I ask like, what's this, or what position am I in here, right? Like kind of the more easier questions, we just have to make sure that we get those, that we're consistent with the easy questions. They're not all going to be hard. Let me scroll down. Exactly. That is exactly correct. You don't have to have the hand motion to pronate or supinate. You can move just like we've done previously, where you can have motion where you move the hand, but you can have flexion and extension where you don't move the hand. You can have neck motion where you move the head, but you can have neck motion where you don't move the head, right? So we have precedent with these concepts. Here it's applying to the radioulnar joint. Absolutely correct. That is a true statement.
I seen on an old lecture where you were explaining dips and what happens with like the scapula and stuff like that. I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of confused if you can further explain like how that works.
Yeah. So first of all, before I get into that specific example, let me explain why I think these things are confusing, because ups and downs globally don't necessarily match ups and downs locally. So the example before I get to the dip is like the lat pull down, the bar is coming down and my scapula are downwardly rotating. Great, lines up. But when I'm doing a pull up, when I'm pulling my body up, my scapula is actually downwardly rotating because it's the same motion. Does that make sense before I go on to the dip?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So for the dip, it's very similar. For the dip, when I'm pushing my body up, my scapula is actually going to be depressing or going down. When I'm lowering my body down, my scapula is actually going to be elevating and going up. It's kind of the same illusion there.
That makes sense. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's a really good question. And again, guys, and I know by now you don't take it personally. I don't take it personally. It's our brains and our eyes that want to fixate onto these global references. We want up to always mean up. We want down to always mean down. And maybe that's the case in it globally, but not in our bodies. Sometimes we go up because something in our body goes down. Kind of one way to look at that illusion. And also, Danae, great job of going back and looking at old lectures. I mean, I think, we only have so much time to do examples and stuff. And so that's an awesome resource, I think, to go back and look at past lectures where I might use different analogies, and, you get some extra practice problems in there.
Yeah, that's why I do it, just in case you might mention something that you didn't mention.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and keep in mind, it's still going to be the same concepts, just maybe the application might be different, right? The type, the specific question, but it's not like I'm going to ask you about a joint that I never talked about, right? But it's really good practice. All right, let's keep it going, guys. We are at 10 minutes left. I would stay longer. but I have to prep my biomechanics. I mean, I'm not literally going to stop it at 8:20 if someone's asking a question, but I'm hoping that this is a good way. Maybe I might start doing this every review where everybody can kind of have everything planned. If you're not a talker, you could type questions. If you don't mind talking, you can talk. Students that can't come to class can watch. And again, I'm going to upload it to my YouTube channel and post the link so you still have it. So, always trying new things. And so hopefully this was one of the better ones. Anything else, guys?
I don't think I have any more questions for
Awesome.
class.
Awesome. Well, if y'all do have any more questions, let me repeat that the part about the unit checks and stuff. So that was Miriam, Sydney, and Sarah doing that just to help. So I don't have anything to. They're doing that on their own. So if you want to reach out to them and see if they're doing that, you're more than welcome to. And outside of that, if y'all need anything else, I will have virtual office hours today. So what that means is that if you do have a question, shoot me a text. Let me know that you're not trying to extend my car insurance, right? That you're not a telemarketer, and we could either talk, FaceTime. Maybe it's a question I could clarify by writing an answer, but I'm available for any kind of fine tuning questions. Okay, so just know that that is on the table if you guys are studying and you have some kind of question. Okay.
I don't know if everyone in here is in the group me, but they did say that they will be hosting a review session later on tonight at 6:15.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank
But
you
they
for
said
mentioning
they're
that.
not doing a knowledge check.
A knowledge check. Gotcha. So yeah, I don't know anything about those things. So I appreciate you. Well, I know them when they tell me, and then I could communicate it. And maybe they emailed me or text me. I haven't checked that yet. So that thank you for bringing that up. That there's going to be, and I'm assuming it's in 153B, or I guess it depends on how many students show up, huh?
Yeah, I guess it should be, but that was all she said was that she's just hosting one at 6:15 on Monday. But I
Gotcha.
believe
Gotcha.
it's always the same room though.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. All right, guys, y'all have a good one. Like I said, if y'all need anything, if you have any questions, hit me up via email or my cell phone. I have it on Moodle on the syllabus, and I have that because this is a hybrid class, and I want you guys to have access to me if you have any questions. Okay. All right. We'll see you guys on Wednesday.